So it's a great pleasure to invite you to this panel, AI Beyond the Hype, the Impact on BioPharma. I think the reason I was invited is that I'm the Chief Business Officer of Cureteq, which is an AI-enabled biotech. So we work with our parent company Partex and leverage their AI capabilities to find hidden, unappreciated assets, to due diligence them, come up with creative, quick and cost-effective paths to value inflection. We put them into subcos that are investable by VCs. And the first of these is called Oncotech. We're raising Series A now. And it's got a really nice first-in-class molecule for estrogen receptor breast cancer with amazing efficacy and therapeutic window, and a best-in-class CD30 ADC. So happy to talk to anybody about Oncotech. But I think I got interested in AI actually earlier in my life when I was head of R&D for Lonza, and I got into synthetic biology and realized how important it is to combine machine learning with multiplexing, robotics, microfluidics, DNA barcoding, signal detection, and do fast throughput on a massive scale with rapid learning to improve biomanufacturing. I don't think we'll talk much about biomanufacturing today because we have a different panel. But obviously all of those things are very relevant to drug discovery as well. And we have a very nice balanced panel because we have a service provider, an investor, a big pharma, and a biotech. So we're going to get all those different perspectives on the topic. And before I ask the panel to introduce themselves, I'll just quickly give you some AI factoids to set the scene. So I think last year, McKinsey set out a report saying there are about 400 biotechs that sort of built their business model around AI, about half focused on discovery, a quarter on drug development, and then a quarter on what they called R&D. The founding peak, interestingly, was in 2018. The capital deployed grew 10 times from 2017 to 21. There were 5 IPOs in 21, including Recursion and Exscientia, who've now merged. The number of deals also grew to over 50 by 21. I think things might have calmed down a bit since 21, but clearly it's been a really hot area. I do think the Recursion Exscientia merger is really interesting because Recursion have been using AI to uncover novel biology and develop first-in-class molecules. And Exscientia have been using AI to really improve medicinal chemistry and accelerate the throughput time for medchem. So combining excellence in biology and chemistry is a really interesting development, and we'll see how that turns out. A few other factoids. I think talking about moving from hype to reality, McKinsey did a report where they looked at how AI could impact the whole value chain for pharma from discovery through to commercial, and reckoned it could unlock about 60 to 100 billion in value, all the way from discovery, knowledge extraction through development, operations, commercial, medical affairs, and had real use cases from practitioners. So it feels as though this is maturing and starting to really have impact throughout the pharma value chain. And even in the field of deal making, I think it was, who was it? It was Intralinks who recently reported that AI is actually getting used a lot in M&A. And I think Bain have forecast that in 3 years, 80% of M&As will leverage AI. So even in deal making, it's starting to become used. But with that sort of scene setting, I'll hand over to the panelists to introduce themselves and tell us a bit about them and their company. So should we just go down the road, Frank?
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Sarah. My name is Frank Grams. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer of Partex. My history is that the last 5 years, I've been in biotech. Before that, 8 years with Sanofi. Before that, about 16 years with Roche in a number of functions. Today, as I said, it's Partex. Partex as a group is focusing on 3 major business areas. One is what we call asset management, and Sarah alluded a little bit about this. So this is essentially an AI-driven portfolio management approach. Second business line is asset services. This is support for R&D with AI tools, so everything from early stage, target identification, biomarker search, and so on, up to filing. We also have a bit of Gen AI business. In addition, in the services area, we have validation. So we have acquired Amgen's former high-throughput screening center in Regensburg. And then on top of this, we are also heavily in patient data, which means we have a huge project in India where we're working with the government. We have 22 hospital collaborations. We are currently setting up a huge collaboration in Germany, which gives us access to about 400 private practices. We also have a little bit here in Switzerland. In the moment, we're still in the acquisition mode, but we're turning into the sales mode very soon on the patient data. So it's one of the future big areas for us. And then the last business lines that we have is what we call asset exchange. This is really support of business development. Yeah, what this means is that we identify new indications for old products. We give these list of new indications with all the evidence to our clients. We help them to get a product out licensed. And similarly, we help them for in-licensing. Yeah, we also have large collaborations on in-licensing, where we have a number of unique selling factors that are very different from traditional business development. We're using our scale, and scale means we currently have 1,000 NVIDIA GPUs, which is also pretty unique. And we also have a pretty huge patent estate. Yeah, if you compare us with our main competitors, that typically have not more than 35, 40 technology patents. We have about 200 granted patents plus 300 plus patent applications. So maybe I'll stop there and then go to Nina.
All right. Hey, so my name is Nina Kreymborg. I work right now at Curie.Bio, and I will tell you a little bit more about what we do there. Just a few words to my personal background. I have a scientific background in immunology and cancer immunotherapy. I worked for Roche for many years, followed by MorphoSys, spent some years at Versant Ventures here in Basel, and then with Curie since the beginning of this year. And what is very interesting about the Curie model, so Curie is a novel seed stage investor. So we are basically there since not even 2 years yet, but we have already kind of invested and funded 20 companies by now. So all of these companies have very exciting science, and we absolutely believe in the drug to be made. So this is the focus really of the Curie diligence as well. So you will see, if you're familiar with Curie, or you will look at the homepage, that we have a team of over 80 people now, and all of these people are actually coming from an operator background and have developed drugs themselves, so really know what they're talking about. And I think that is a huge power that we would like to bring to the new companies to help them. So we call ourselves co-pilots, and this is part of one part of the job that we're doing. So we're not only a seed stage investor. Our typical ticket sizes are between 5 and 10 million. But we also provide these services as co-pilots. So we really co-pilot along the founder and try to fill the gaps that there may be. So all these gaps may be different. Sometimes chemistry knowledge is needed. Sometimes it's more on the kind of market analysis side. Could be anything, could be more the back office, so whatever is needed. And I think it's very interesting to be part of this panel because I think AI plays a role for Curie in 2 ways. One is obviously it is a huge part of the proposals that we see. By now we have in total seen over 3,000 proposals in these close to 2 years. And there you can obviously detect also a little bit of the impact of potential hype cycles or not in how the proposals are being made. That is one part, of course, where we evaluate AI in the context of new potential companies. But I think for Curie.Bio, it's also very interesting to use AI as kind of really early adapters in the evaluation and investment decision making. And I think this is quite novel in the biotech space. And the reason why we are so focused on this is probably also that 2 of our founders at Curie.Bio come more from the tech background. So it's Zach Weinberg, who some of you may know, and they are bringing really this kind of different view into the system, which I find very interesting.
Very cool. Nice to be here. My name is Patrick. I lead the biomedical AI group at GSK. We're a small group trying to address the entirety of the drug discovery spectrum from the very early stages, where we do lab in the loop type things, active learning, integrating machine learning with discovery, all the way to the clinic, where we help identify the right people to receive the medicines and hopefully make our clinical trials more streamlined in the process as well. I'm really excited about this topic in particular. I think it's very timely, and AI is one of these really interesting topics where it's clear that it will be impactful in the future, but as the previous speakers have said, there's a lot to unpack there below the surface, and so I'd be really, really excited here to talk about that today.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ricardo. I am here representing Insilico Medicine, an AI drug discovery company. My background is actually an MD. I started my professional career working in the clinic to begin with, and then associated with clinical research, which led me to Big Pharma. I spent 10 years, more or less, in Big Pharma, in Novartis, AstraZeneca, and Roche. And now I'm supporting the growth of biotech companies such as Insilico Medicine. For the ones that do not know, Insilico Medicine has been developing AI platforms in place, one more focused on biology, another more focused on medicinal chemistry, and another more focused on the transition between different stages of preclinical to IND enabling stage to clinical stage assets. We have used the same proprietary platforms internally to develop our own pipeline. We currently have 5 clinical stage programs, the most advanced one in phase 2, a couple of others in phase 1, and then already nominated a couple of preclinical candidate assets additionally, not only in oncology, but also in immunology, infectious diseases, so a little bit across the board. Independently of that, we have 2 business models, one more focused on the tech side, so we license the software that we have developed, or we do strategic partnerships on a platform level. And at the same time, we also look for the best partners for each of our assets, namely pharma, biotech, whatever makes sense. So pleasure to be here and discuss with this panel.
Thank you so much. As you can see, we have a fantastic panel. So maybe I can start off with kicking the discussion off. In the month when NVIDIA suffered the highest loss in market cap ever in the history of any company, and when also Recursion had some data that led to kind of a bit of a backlash, where are we in the hype cycle? What do you think, Nina?
Yeah, I think when you think about in a diagram, the hype cycle, I think we're past the peak, but it's not a valley. So I think it's actually a healthy development and leveling out a little bit. And I would say that we can also see this in the deal flow. And when we look at the different proposals that we're getting, I think at the more towards the peak of the hype cycle, I had a feeling that many of the proposals were really built around this, obviously to leverage the hype cycle. From the founder perspective, that makes a lot of sense because you think that this really raises more interest. But I think that is the first category of AI claims that we see in which it's really not directly linked and not very clear how this leads to the value generation. And so to Sarah, to your question, I think we are really there where we are back to really asking ourselves the question, what exactly does AI want to solve for? And I think that is a very important question to ask, and basically means that we are there where we actually see the value of AI and understand better how and where to apply it and where maybe we're not ready to do that yet.
And when you look at an opportunity, is it important that there's an asset to exemplify the approach, or are you happy to look at a kind of platform?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that is central to the Curie thinking as well. So for us, it's very important that not only if it's a platform proposal, that the platform has some sort of proof, but coming back to the initial question to be asked, like how does AI generate actual value? And I think for us, we really look at whether or not a direct asset will result out of that. And this asset can then not only prove the platform, but is a valuable asset in itself, which will move into the clinic and so forth. And I think a very good example of that is one of the first companies that we invested in and founded, Decrypt, that was very early on in the very early days of Curie, and it was an AI-based proposal and company. But I think the special thing there is as well that is not fully relying on AI. That's my first point. It's actually an iteration between AI and then wet lab activities. That's the first thing. And then the second, there was a very clear question that could be solved, a very clear problem to be solved. So in this case of Decrypt, it's a way to basically identify novel druggable pockets that hadn't been able to be identified before and without AI. And we have with that method, or the company has actually identified a few very interesting molecules. And I think here, coming back to the Curie model, really the input of this huge team comes into play because it will be about the target. So we really then think about what will be a very meaningful target, and putting the founders and the kind of AI knowledge and then the target understanding and biology together, I think yielded the magic mix.
Thank you. And Patrick, what's your view?
Oh, I tend to actually agree partially with what Nina said. So I think I fall on the same side when it comes to, it's clear we've had given some of the early ideas some 10 years now, right, to prove out that these early ideas work or don't work. And I think we're starting to learn across the industry which are the ideas that actually, have sustainable impact. I think a lot of people started out with believing in some kind of transformative change coming from AI. That has not played out, I would say. We can probably confidently say that hasn't been happening. This is to some degree a disappointment. I think also it has been a success. So disappointment because it hasn't really moved us beyond the 20-30 medicines a year that we currently approved, and that was always the case also before. But also it has been a huge success in the sense that it has been adopted really widely. And it is the state of the art. It is something that people use practically to discover medicines. Yet it hasn't been transformative. So I think this is a really bifurcated situation where you have to think about this in a little bit more minute manner to really understand what is happening. So it is both essential, but it hasn't been transformative. And I think that's where we're currently standing. Now, I disagree with Nina when it comes to the peak statement, because I do actually think we are probably pre-peak. And the reason is actually the same reason that you gave why you think it is post-peak. It's because we haven't found yet the key application. So I think the key peak moment will happen when we have found that key application. So the good analog you can draw is a ChatGPT moment. I think we haven't had the ChatGPT moment in bio yet. And that will be the peak, I think. We haven't seen that yet. So I would say we are probably pre-peak because the promise is real. We just haven't yet iterated enough to really find that key moment. So the signals are there. Everybody's using it. Everybody believes in it. But it's still to be transformative in the future, I believe.
And Ricardo, I guess it's quite early for people to jump to judgment because we're only just seeing molecules getting into kind of phase 2 when you start to see real signals. So what's your view? Do you think maybe we're just jumping to judgment too fast and it's still playing out?
I think there was definitely a hype for sure within the industry, but we see signs of the industry also consolidating, right? So, when I think we tend to overestimate any new negative news around something that AI has touched, such as, for example, coming back to the recursion data that was announced earlier. We are pretty stringent on drug development on itself already, right? But sometimes we forget that independently if a target has been chosen or used with a technology platform and a molecule has been designed also using a platform for that purpose, we tend to kind of forget that we're talking about the same kind of drug development moving forward either way, right? So I think sometimes we are a little bit more stringent on molecules that have somehow been touched with AI before rather than the traditional drug development methods. And yeah, I think that's definitely something that we need to also take into consideration, given that we are in an earlier stage. But I think there's a lot of positive signs coming. We hope to also bring positive ones ourselves, but I think the industry is definitely consolidating. So,
and Frank?
Yeah, so I just wanted to comment on Patrick's comment regarding the key applications. I think we need to manage the expectations. So Sarah mentioned recursion, so what happened to them, but it's not sure if it's clear to everybody. It's not only recursion, but also benevolent. They had a drug failure and the share price went down by 80-90%. Yeah? Although they had a big pipeline, yeah, which is completely irrational. But the expectation to AI is simply if you do something with AI, it must be successful. And that's, of course, not the case. Yeah? So there are only incremental improvements. And that is leading me to Patrick's comment. Yeah? So I don't think we will find a key application. It will be more an incremental improvement on all of these steps. And this is also why those companies will probably be more successful that can add to every single of these steps and therefore shorten the whole value chain from early stage discovery up to filing. And just one last comment regarding us on this aspect. Although we also cover R&D, AI support, and so on, we are focusing a little bit more on the lower hanging fruits. Yeah? So as our CEO always tends to say, we don't want to win the Nobel Prize. We're really trying to see, well, where can we really add impact with a lesser impact, with a lesser activity. And this is, for example, on the BD side, yeah, so where we don't need to solve very complicated scientific problems, but it's more about managing the daily business and making it easier and faster. And that's more our focus exactly for these reasons.
Maybe just a quick comment, if I may,
Yeah.
because I fully agree, Frank, with your comment on the managing expectations. And to me, that again comes back to asking the right questions. I think we cannot expect the magic solution to everything, but I think the more focused the question is, and this may also be interesting then for potential founders who have an idea, will be where exactly what exactly does this solve? Is it the time benefit? Is it a new target? Is it a new compound? I think the question has to be as specific as possible in terms of managing expectations as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to have a quick reaction on Frank's comment. I think, Frank, you got it half right. I think there's two ways to think about AI. There's basically, you can bifurcate it into two classes of contributions. One of the contributions of AI is clearly in the automation area, where you're basically just making an existing process a few % better. Few % faster, cheaper, etc. These are the clear cases. They are predictable. You can calculate an ROI. Great for investors, right? So something that you guys will probably love. But there's the second class of AI contributions that I think we're currently underappreciating. That's why I believe we're ChatGPT moment for bio AI, because there is also qualitative changes where you can do certain things that you couldn't do before because of this technology. And these we don't talk about so much because they're less predictable, but I always like to give a simple example. I used to previously work at Roche, and we had a program for individualized cancer vaccines, and they were therapeutic, so they were basically designed to be used for a single person. Now, a few companies nowadays have these programs, and there's some economic challenges with developing them, but these types of programs, they actually would not have been possible without AI. Why? Because we have been using AI to design that individualized vaccine for every single person that receives that vaccine. Impossible to do with any other technology. You can't sit down a human and have hundreds of thousands of predictions being done with any degree of accuracy. Just doesn't scale. So these technologies, they can actually enable business models and new applications, new approaches that are qualitatively different than what you could have done before. And I think that side of it is underappreciated. And I think we will see more of that being explored in the future as people start to have exhausted the automation direction, which I think we cannot expect a transformative change from. I agree with that.
And maybe I can ask Ricardo, do you think that AI is going to uncover new biological insights that were not available before? I think it's going to give us, this is kind of the recursion, thesis. Do you think we're going to be able to do things we could not do before biologically?
Well, I think even if a target has been, or a signaling pathway and the target within that signaling pathway has been somewhat discovered already and has been identified, that's one thing. Another thing is for you to develop a molecule with specific characteristics to address that target, and at the same time make it possible to develop further for a specific indication, and then within that, which is going to be the target prioritized indications that you're going to follow throughout drug development. So throughout preclinical development and then throughout drug development, hopefully, right? So I think definitely we have seen that independently of targets already have been discovered. We were able to take some of those targets and create new small molecules for those targets and then progress them through the preclinical stages of development until the clinic. So I'm a bit biased, but I do really believe that we uncover new insights there.
And I guess one thing you mentioned was actually the indication. So, Frank, I think that's something that sometimes AI seems to be able to uncover a new use for a known target.
Yeah, but this is one of the big topics in our company. So we use it actually for out licensing, but not only for that, also for portfolio prioritization, and also EY is using it for ranking companies and things like this. But let me just allude what this means. So if we look for new indications, we look for weak signals. Yeah. So where do we find weak signals on the internet? And we scan the whole internet for biomedical information practically on a daily basis. So we look for these weak signals. Once we found them, we zoom in. We try to find the biological evidences why it could work in another indication. So we've looked for all the patents, all the publications, everything that we can find, hospital web pages, patient blogs, whatsoever. So make a strong case on the biology side. Then we look at the clinical feasibility. So we generate a clinical plan. We check on the probability of success of the clinical plan. And we can do this because we've also a tool where we've studied 86,000 clinical trials, and derived about 350 parameters of that all have a positive or negative impact on the outcome of a clinical trial. And if you use this and you put it on an unbiased data set to see, well, what is the prediction power, it's about 86%. Yeah? So in 86% of the cases, we can predict if a trial will be successful or not based on the setup of the trial. So we use this also in the indication prioritization. And then last step is we look at the market. So we look at the competition, we look at the market size, all the different components. We calculate an NPV. We take all these parameters together and then come up with a ranked list of different indications. And then based on that, we give the list to the client together with a comprehensive report. So they can just put it into their slide decks if it's about out-licensing. They put it into the slide decks, can send it out to their potential clients. And with that, it's much, much more interesting for a potential licensee to license this asset. So we have a large collaboration, for example, with Sanofi that is using it. Also with another big top 10 pharma company where we're unfortunately not allowed to disclose the name. But as I said, it's not only used there, it's also used in prioritization, it's used in rankings and so on and so on. Thanks.
So we talked about the impact of AI potentially on uncovering novel biological insights, but thinking more broadly, maybe directing to Patrick in Big Pharma, where do you see AI having the greatest impact in R&D? Where do you see that?
Oh, that's a brilliant question. I think some of the use cases we talk all the time about are more in this early stage discovery science use cases. But actually in the near to medium term, I think a lot of the potential for larger efforts, larger scale efforts like we have at GSK is really in the clinical studies and the clinical trials and helping patients actually achieve better outcomes with these medicines, helping us do better trials, really optimizing that part of the portfolio because a lot of the mileage is actually gained there. I'll give a good example. So we have a quite exhaustive portfolio of software nowadays that supports every single asset that we develop. And one of the examples that I always like to talk about is our hepatitis B portfolio, where we're developing a new in-class medicine that basically achieves for the first time ever a functional cure, which basically means these people do not have to be treated ever again for hepatitis B, which is a complete novelty in that space. And for this, we're actually developing a whole range of tools that really help people decide when to get treated, what are their odds to getting treated, how do you want to get treated, what is the best way to actually apply that to get the best response. And this is some really, really tough mathematical problem. You can imagine the profile of every person, the richness of all the data we can collect on these people, and using that to really drive these personalized decisions. Again, a really good case of like this qualitative contribution where simply without AI, we couldn't do it. There's no way a human could ever observe millions of people's records to try to understand what are the patterns that would predict any of these things. However, an AI tool and a machine learning algorithm can easily do that, and we can set our computers to try to solve these types of really hard optimization issues. And that really helps raise the potential of these medicines, that helps raise the chance that they make it to patients, that really helps raise the chance that they can reach more and more individuals to help them achieve even better outcomes. We don't talk a lot about these use cases yet, but I think there's a huge amount of potential in achieving that throughout the pipeline. And as you can imagine, as GSK, we're running quite a large range of a portfolio, and we are evaluating a lot of medicines at each given time. And you can imagine what the cumulative impact of that will be, having this software stack for every single asset to try to help make those decisions at scale, which previously we just couldn't have done that at this scale. So I do think there are really big impacts to be expected from that as well. Not as much visibility on that yet. A lot of the science still gets the attention, but I think these things are really things that move the needle for patients. And ultimately, I think that's what we're all here for.
And when you talk about having a software stack for an asset, what does that mean?
Oh, literally, yeah, good question. Literally just means having software that helps us make these decisions. Okay. In the first step, it would be in clinical studies, of course, right? So internally, we just optimize our clinical trials by making better decisions what populations do we run these studies in, who receives when, what type of medication, what schedule, right? So all of these types of really intricate, hard optimization issues that require a lot of data today. And in the past, we may have not integrated as much data into these problems. But now we can actually bring together all of this evidence to really make the best decisions there. And, you know, these incremental 5% on each trial, that does increase quite a lot the odds over a big portfolio. And secondarily, some of these tools, they may even reach patients and may help clinicians make decisions, right? So there's the whole side of the companion tools, companion diagnostics, where some of these software can maybe even inform then using the same data that we anyway already collect in clinical studies to basically help people make those decisions then in the real world. So I think when you go through this kind of translational chain from the early research that helps make better decisions all the way to the patient, when you then have all of the same problems in the real world, I think that's how you can then really see the impact, and that really is something that people feel. Right, and I think that's when it gets real. A lot of these early science ideas, right, where we talk about lead identification, etc., that doesn't really touch a patient, or it doesn't really immediately touch a patient yet. It may in the future, but with these ideas, it's really visceral that it's doing something for people. It's really something that a patient can feel. If you talk about a hepatitis B patient, 90% of them undiagnosed today, right? So there may be people in this room that have it and don't know. And usually you learn only about it when you have liver cancer at the end of your life, right? And from the chronic inflammation that you have building up over your lifetime. And so most people live without any knowledge of that, right? And so algorithms, tools that can help us raise that from currently 10% to hopefully a higher rate of recognition of this disease, and then also the treatment rates somewhere around 5%, crazy low amount, right? So most people that, even the few people that know that they have hepatitis B, they don't even get treated, right? So it's really, really sad state of things. And I think reality in the healthcare system is still many of these situations exist. And there's such a large way from, you know, what we're doing today to what could be possible if we were to leverage all the technology, if we were to use all of the data. And I think that's really where the underappreciated potential for AI, in my opinion, lives, is moving that from the 10% to the 50, to the 60, to the 70. That may be incremental, but that's 6 times more people getting help in the real world. And I think that is something that people care about.
Frank, I think you were going to comment.
Just a quick comment on what you just said. There's another aspect on this clinical data, which is the support for the governments, and essentially the funding of the healthcare system. So we are working, for example, together with the Indian government, and India wants to digitalize the whole healthcare system and make it self-funding. Yeah, so the idea is also a number of companies on this project. We are just one of them. But our role is really to collect all the clinical data, structure them, get the insights, and then sell the insights. And this money would then go back to the government, which would then fund the healthcare system. And I think this is the future. Yeah? So the governments need to think about how is healthcare sustainable, and data is one way of doing it.
I think that's actually a really brilliant point. I'll just react quickly, because I think you made a really, really astute observation there, which is, I think we tend to think like in this existing framework of how things have been for the longest time. I think maybe the biggest change that we're not focusing enough about is all of biomedicine is changing with data and with tools and with these kinds of availabilities of technology becoming really something that can shift the needle at a massive scale across thousands of use cases. And I think we're only beginning to see some of the potential of that. And just imagine if everybody in the world had access to the best doctor, and with AI that could become reality. And I think in many real world scenarios, we're still not achieving the best outcomes for people in all of these different diseases, hundreds of diseases with so many different problems. And AI is really, at its core, really a scalable technology, and it can solve problems at scale. So it's maybe a really good fit for these types of problems. So yeah, maybe a call to action here, not to be blind to the larger shift that is ongoing in the entirety of the field in which we operate. So I would definitely call out that. That was a great comment by Frank.
So shifting focus a bit, Nina, how you talked about Curie being a bit of a pioneer in using AI. How do you actually use AI in your investment decision making? And are you a pioneer? Are there other people doing it, or are you really out there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think in the tech world, this is much more common practice already. So I think their AI is much more closely embedded into also everyday decision making. It's more natural. I think in the more kind of biology, biotech world, Curie is one of the early adapters, and for several reasons. One, I already mentioned that some of the Curie founders actually come from this tech world, but then also, and I heard from Patrick the comment at scale a lot. And Curie wants to also help to fund companies at scale. And to be able to do this, I think it's mandatory to use tools such as AI to help. And it's a very different context, but a little bit the same principle, because with this kind of proposition or goal to do company creation at scale and help the founders really at scale, we are using AI in everyday life a lot. So not only what Sarah mentioned to make investment decisions, but here it's very important to understand that obviously it's not like we're not asking ChatGPT, should we invest, yes or no? But there's a very crucial human element to that. But all the kind of the data collection, the kind of integration, the putting things into context, we use AI a lot. But then, of course, and there's a clear reason why the team we have is quite large to then make sense out of this and really kind of introduce the human component. But that actually leads me to the second example where we use AI in an everyday life, and that is actually for recruitment. So this is a completely different kind of topic we haven't touched upon, but it is to really find the best people, not only to hire into the company. So there's a whole team of recruiters who have developed and programmed kind of their own tool. And this is mining databases that are out there for the best talents. But also here again, I think it's very important to ask the right question. And that is, I think, very interesting. We do the same thing for the expert network. So we really see a high value in consulting with the right experts, getting the best input, because no one knows everything. There's always someone who knows more than yourself, and that is what we definitely want to leverage. So we use it for that as well. And then also the early intake. So just managing all the different proposals that we see, because the aim is really to be transparent and to be approachable and not to kind of ghost anyone. And I think for that, it's very important to have a very, very sophisticated database and also kind of cross-reference. So we do that as well with the help of AI to be able to then also in 5 years' time be able to see, okay, maybe there's a second or third proposal from the same founder, what has been kind of the interaction so far. So these are some everyday examples. And I think that's a very new spin. And I'm quite sure that we will see much more of this in, let's say, 2, 3, 5 years' time.
Thank you. And Ricardo, we've heard clearly GSK and other big pharmas are building a lot of in-house capability in AI. So does that make it more challenging to a biotech to find a basis for partnership? And why do people still partner with companies like Insilico? What drives that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, and it depends on the company itself. We have certainly seen that a lot of companies are developing their own internal efforts in the area, which makes it a little bit more challenging and different when we have some of those conversations and negotiations. But we need to also bear in mind the different kind of beast that we're talking about here when we talk about big pharma versus a biotech. So on one end, we have found that with specific potential partners that are developing things internally, they're not so interested in on the platform side, but rather more interested on the biotech side. So on specific assets that they would either license from us or consider doing a co-development together with us, whatever it might be. In some other cases, depending on the partner's objectives, it can be rendered as a strategic partnership in kind, which kind of leverages the best of both worlds, right? The platform in itself. And in some cases, we have partnerships where we're developing drugs for specific areas of interest for that partner. In some other cases, we're just looking at identifying novel targets of interest for specific therapy areas, right? So one example is, for example, the deal we struck, I think more or less 1.5 years ago with Sanofi, which is looking at multi-targets, novel targets only, and then generating new small molecules for those targets and prioritizing them for full preclinical development. So it really depends, but it makes it, I think we need to kind of bear in mind and tailor our proposal based on what we already know of the potential partner, but also on meaningful conversations and understand how we can derive value to the partner according to their objectives.
Great. I've got lots more really good questions, but we're running out of time. So are there any burning questions in the audience before we end up?
Congratulations, great discussions. A specific question to Patrick, maybe. Based on your experience at Roche with the individualized cancer vaccination, you touched quantitative benefits from AI, qualitative, right? And the next step is creativity. And there's a big debate out, but I think it's being decided right now, there will be creativity. We might not even understand how the system itself found that logic that human brains could not manage. To see, do you see drugs or proteins being designed by an AI deep learning system in the next 5 years?
Great question, but I think we don't have to look out 5 years to see that. In fact, people are doing that today and actively, actually, and in many different programs. I'd like to talk about vaccines, for example, neoantigen design, a very big part of using AI, and these tools are really, really helpful at exploring spaces that we may not have explored traditionally. It is really an interesting contribution. I think what you have to understand about all of these tools is that they are tools and they help you doing your job better. I would still classify all of these tasks as what we before discussed as automation, right? So it just basically helps you do more with your time than you might have been able. It doesn't replace or it doesn't transform the step of finding those types of candidates. They still need to be refined, right? There's a lot of steps that follow afterwards. But they do help you and they do contribute. They do make you quicker and more effective at what you're doing. That's the primary contribution there. I like to call out the work by David Baker, for example, in Seattle at the Protein Design Institute. They have been really leading this direction. They, in fact, had a vaccine candidate, I think, in South Korea approved with some of their methods recently. So there are good examples of these approaches being used. And there's a Nature paper about every month, I think, about this topic. So I would not be surprised if that is not something of a story of 5 years, but rather today. Now, why is that a big thing and why is that something where AI is really helpful? And the design step, you can imagine, is really a multi-dimensional optimization issue, right? So traditionally, imagine you're set with the task of optimizing a molecule for 70 different properties at the same time. You will quickly meet your human limits in terms of attention span and focus, whereas machine learning models, they're actually quite well suited to doing this kind of work and really considering all the evidence, considering everything that you have in the data. And that's really where the killer applications are. And this is why when I made my initial statement, I said AI currently is not transformative, it's essential because you actually cannot do this work without AI. It is an extension of yourself and it helps you do that work. And that's why it has found this immense adoption in the field. And that's why everybody's using it. It's because you simply couldn't do your job. You couldn't integrate all this evidence in any other way today. So that's where it's clear that it is part of what we do in the state of the art. But I still believe also in the transformative potential that we have yet to see to come. But I think, and also part of the reason why I believe in this transformative potential is partially hope, because I do think we can do better for people. And if you look at the statistics in terms of productivity, in terms of how many medicines we bring to people every year, I think we are not performing at the highest level that we could. And so I have some hope that there's transformative potential because there's so much unmet need in the world that the society would need it. So I think that is my takeaway is I hope the hype can play out.